Unit 14 Rationality, Work and Organization. Contents 14.1 Introduction, 14.2 Rationality, 14.3 Organization Theory and Sociology of Organizations, 14.4 Work and Organizations, 14.5 Conclusion, 14.6 for the reading. Learning objective. After you have read this unit, you should be able to understand the concept of rationality, work and organization vis-a-vis modern capitalistic society. Understand the concept of organizations through theory of organization and sociology of organizations. 14.1 Introduction. In modern society, the significance of rationality, work and organization is implicit in our everyday life. The classical sociologists Karl Marx, Max Weber and Emile Durkheim have conceptually dealt with this concept in their writings. In their quest to analyze the structure of capitalism and its ramifications for a just and fair social order, they explain this concept from different standpoints. The organization theory and sociology of organizations provide comprehensive analysis of organizations. 14.2 Rationality. The world of modernity, Weber stressed over and over again, has been deserted by the gods. Man has chased them away and has rationalized and made calculable and predictable what in an earlier age had seemed governed by chance, but also by feeling, passion and commitment, by personal appeal and personal fear, by grace and by the ethics of charismatic heroes. Weber attempted to document this development in a variety of institutional analysis areas. His studies in the sociology of religion were meant to trace the complicated and tortuous way in which the gradual rationalization of religious life had led the displacement of magical procedure by rational systematization of man's relations to the divine. Traditional, I think we in the traditional system. Okay, anyway, he attempted to show how prophets with their characteristic appeals had undermined priestly powers based on tradition, how with the emergence of book religion, the final systematization and rationalization of the religious sphere had set in, which found its culmination in the Protestant ethic. In the sphere of law, Weber documented a similar course from a Qadi justice, the personalized dispensing of justice by wise leaders or elders, to the codified, rationalized and impersonal justice of the modern world. He traced the development of political authority from kings endowed with the hereditary charisma and thaumaturgical powers to cool heads of states ruling within the district limits of legal perceptions and rationally enacted law. Even so, private an area of experience as music, Weber contended was not exempt from the rationalizing tendencies of Western society. In his writing on the sociology of music, Weber contrasted the concise notions and the well-tempered scale of modern music, the rigorous standardization and coordination that governs a modern symphony orchestra, with the spontaneity and inventiveness of the social system of Asia or of non-literate tribes. The spread of secular rationalism. Among the characteristics in terms of which European development was distinctive were the specific form of the state and the existence of rational law. Weber attaches great emphasis to the significance to the heritage of Roman law for the subsequent social and economic development of Europe, and in particular for the rise of the modern state. Without the juristic rationalism, the rise of the absolute state is just as little imaginable as is in the French Revolution. The connections between this and the development of rational capitalism, however, was not simple and clear cut. Modern capitalism first took root in England, but that country was much less influenced by Roman law than other continental countries were. The prior existence of a system of rational law was only once influenced in a complicated interplay of factors leading to the formation of the modern state. The trend towards the development of the modern state characterized by the presence of a professional administration carried on by salaried officials and based on the concept of citizenship was certainly not only an outcome of economic rationalization and in part preceded it. Nevertheless, it is true that the advance of the capitalistic economic order and the growth of the state are intimately connected. The development of national and international markets and the concomitant destruction of the influence of the logical groups such as kinship units, which formerly played a large part in regulating contracts, all promote the monopolization of and regulation of all legitimate coercive power by one universalist coercive institution. Reflection and action 14.1. Discuss the characteristic of modern state, explain its relation to rationality. B. Modern capitalistic enterprise. Essential to the modern capitalistic enterprise, according to Weber, is the possibility of rational calculation of profits and losses in terms of money. Modern capitalism is inconceivable without the development of capital accounting. In Weber's view, rational bookkeeping constitutes the most integral expression of what makes the modern type of capitalistic production dissimilar to prior sort of capitalistic activities such as usury of adventurous capitalism. The circumstances which Weber details as necessary to the existence of capital accounting is stable productive enterprises constitute those which Weber accepts as the basic prerequisite for modern capitalism and include those factors under which Marx placed more emphasis. Box 14.1 Prerequisite of modern capitalism. The existence of a large mass of wage laborers who are not only legally free to dispose of their labor power on the open market but who are actually forced to do so to earn their livelihood. 2. Absence of restrictions upon economic exchange in the market, in particular removal of status monopolies for production and consumption such as existence in extreme form in the Indian caste system. Third, the use of the technology which is constructed and organized on the basis of rational principles. Mechanization is the clearest manifestation of this. The detachment of the productive enterprises from the household, while the separation of home and workplace is found elsewhere as in the bazaar. It is only in Western Europe that this has proceeded very far. But these economic attributions could not exist without the rational legal administration of modern state. This is a distinctive characteristic of the contemporary capitalistic order, as is the class division between capital and labor in the economic sphere. In general terms, political organizations can be classified in the same way as economic enterprises in relation to whether the means of administration were owned by the administrative staff or are separated from their ownership. The greater the degree to which the ruler succeeds in surrounding himself herself with a prototypeless staff responsible only to him, the less he is challenged by nominal subordinate powers. This process is most competent in the modern bureaucratic state. 14.3 Organization Theory and Sociology of Organization. In practice, organization theory and sociology of organization are used interchangeably, although the former has a slightly wider remit than the latter, as it also covers work by non-sociologists, including those who are concerned to advise to management on how organizations should be designed and operated. As various forms of organization pervade social life, some difficult also attaches to the definition of those, which are the subjective matter of the sociology of organization. In a useful discussion of this problem, David Silverman has suggested that the formal organization with which this branch of sociology is concerned have three distinguishing features. The rise at an ascertainable moment in time. As artifacts, they exhibit patterns of social relationships which are less taken for granted than those in non-formal organizations such as family, and which the organizational participants often seek to coordinate and control. And third, consequently, considerable attention is paid to the nature of these social relations and to planned changes in them. Early organization theory developed along two parallel tracks, reflecting in dual sociological and managerial origins. The growth of industrial societies in the 19th century involved the expansion of large-scale organizations, especially those of the factory and the state. The former of this gave rise to the doctrines of scientific management associated with Frederick William Taylor, and the later provided the exemplar which Weber had in mind when developing his ideal typical account of the structure of bureaucracy. Both these theories concentrated on analyzing the structures of organization, that is, the nature of the various positions occupied by organizational personnel, the powers and duties attaching to these positions, and their relationship to the work required to carry out the explicitly stated goals of the organization. Both also viewed organization as hierarchical structures essential for the managerial control of work. However, in the 1930s and the 1940s, a variety of studies, such as those of the human relationships movement by Chester Bernard and the now classic study of the Tennessee Valley Authority by the sociologist Philip Seisnick, opened up a second era for the analysis, the study of the social process occurring in organization, often with a particular emphasis on how informal unofficial social relationship could constrain or even subvert the official goals of the organization, and with organization as cooperative rather than hierarchical controlled social instructions. There now exists an immense variety of sociological studies of organization and theories about them. Indeed, most of the major schools of sociological theory have contributed to this literature. Stuart Clugg and David Dunkerley, their book Organization, Class and Control 1980, identified four major groupings among the diverse approaches. These are as follows. A. Typologies of organization. Typologies of organizations involve the attempts to classify the organization according to a variety of characteristics, such as who benefit from their operations or how they obtain compliance from their members. Works by Peter Blow, Amite Etzioni, Robert Blauner, and Tom Burns, and G.M. Stacker are among the best known such studies. B. Organization as social systems. This approach is particularly identified by Talcott Parsons' structural functionalist theory of action, and with Philip Selnick and Robert Merton's more focused work on organization. Organization consists of social system in interactions with other social systems, therefore open system whose values and goals are oriented to those of the wider society. According to Parsons, key requirement for organizational maintenance, which is seen to be the overriding goal of any organization, are those which apply to all social systems, namely adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and pattern or value maintenance. C. Organization as empirically contingent structures, an approach particularly associated in the United Kingdom with respect at the University of Aston. The typological and social system approaches have difficulty in clearly defining the organization as a theoretical object. Is it defined solely by a set of typological characteristics, or if it's an open system, where are the system boundaries to be drawn? The Austin diagram applies insights derived from psychology together with the statistical techniques such as scaling and factor analysis to relate measures of organizational performance to different dimensions of organizational structure, such as the degree of specialization of task and centralization of authority. The latter are then related to independent contextual varieties such as size, technology, and location of the enterprises. This essentially implicit approach is subject to all the usual criticism which apply to such as methodology. D. Organization as structures of action. This approach focuses on the circumstances determining the action of individuals in organization. An early contribution was made by Herbert A. Simon's work on satisficing. Later work, for example, by David Silverman, is influenced by the phenomenological sociology, especially the ethnomethodology and the interactionism. Instead of referring the organization, referring to the organizational goals and the need as if the organization, like a human being, could have such things. Organizations are here analyzed as the outcome of the motivated people attempting to resolve their own problems. They are socially constructed by the individual actions of the members having habituated expectation of each other. This approach throws doubt on whether it makes sense to refer organization as institutions which pursue organizational goals. In any event, there have been many studies which show, for example, that official goals may bear no relationship to the actual or operational goals, that organizations frequently have multiple and conflicting goals, that goal displacement may occur. The information culture of work within organization have been and continue to the extensively studied by sociologists influenced by Chicago School of Tech Sociology. This tradition is illustrated in the work of, for example, William F. White, Human Relations in Restaurant Industry in 1948, Donald Roy, Quota Restrictions and Gold Bricking in a Machine Shop, American Journal of Sociology in 1952, and Howard Becker's Boys in White 1961. Reflections and actions in 14.2 describe what is an organization, make a list of their basic characteristics. A great deal of organizations have been characterized for its normative, in this case of pro-marginal bias, for its individualistic analysis of the members of organization, that is, for being more informed by psychological than by relational of power and control in society effects are affected by organization. In other words, for concentrating mainly on the internal exercise of managerial authority and attempt to subvert it. 14.4 Work and Organization, a theoretical perspective on division of labor. In Marx's analysis of bourgeois society, there are two directly related but partially separable sources of alienation rooted in the capitalistic mode of production. The first of this in alienation in the labor process, in the productive activity of the worker. The second is the alienation of the worker from his product, that is, from control of the result of the labor process. For the sake of convenience, Giddens referred to the former as a technological alienation and later as a market alienator. Both of these derived from the division of labor involved in capitalistic production. The later expressed the fact that the organization of productive relationship constitute a class system resting upon an exploitative domains of one class by another. The former identifies occupational specialization as the source of the fragmentation of work into routine and undemanding tasks. For Marx, both types of alienation are integrated to the expansion of division of labor. The emergence of class societies in history is dependent upon the growth of the specialization of tasks made possible by the existence of surplus production. The formation of a classless society will thus lead to the abolition of the division of labor as it is known under capitalism. In Marx's conception of both market and the technological alienation are thus inseparable from the division of labor. The division of labor is nothing but the alienated form of human activity. Box 14.2 Division of labor. Durkheim treats the growth of the division of labor is portrayed in terms of the integrating consequence of specializations rather than in terms of formation of class systems. Consequently, Durkheim treats class conflicts not as providing a basics for the revolutionary restructuring of society, but as symptomatic symptomatic of deficiencies in the moral coordination of different occupational groups within the division of labor. In Durkheim's thesis, the forced division of labor is largely separate from the economic division of labor, and mitigation of first will not in itself cope with the problems posed by the second. According to him, the socialism of Marx is wholly concerned with the alienation of the forces division of labor, which is accomplished through the regulation of the market, the socialization of production. But in Durkheim's stated view, which he opposed to this, the increasing domains of economic relationships consequences upon the destruction of traditional institutions, which are the moral backbone of prior forces of the society, is precisely the main cause of the modern crisis. It is only through moral acceptance in particular role in the division of labor that the individual is able to achieve a high degree of autonomy as a self-conscious being, and can escape both the tyranny of the rigid moral conformity demanded in differentiated societies on the one hand, and the tyranny of unrealizable desires on the other. However, the premises of Marx's conception was that not the moral integration of the individual within a differentiated division of labor, but the effective solution of the division of labor as the organization principle of human social intercourse. B. The problem of bureaucratic organization. In Marx's analysis of extension of division of labor underlying the formation of capitalistic enterprises, the expropriation of the worker from his means of production is given pride of place. In Marx's view, this is the most essential condition for the emergence of bourgeois society, and identifies along a historical dimension the formation of the class relationship between capital and labor, which is implicit in the capitalistic mode of production. It is in the intrinsic nature of the connection between the division of labor and the class structure, which makes it possible for Marx to proceed to the conclusion that the transcendence of alienations and is possible through the abolition of capitalism. Neither Durkheim nor Weber denies the possibility of the formation of socialistic societies, but both asserts that the transmission to socialism will not radically change the existing form of society. An important part of the Weber's writing consists in delineating the factors promoting rationalization on the level of meaning. Weber is also insisted upon tracing the nexus of social relationships which both influence and are influenced by the growing in the rationalization. Thus, for Weber, it is not only the degree but the direction assumed by rationalization in the world and the civilization differ from that of the other major civilizations. In modern Western capitalism, there are various spheres in which rationalization have proceeded in a direction as well as to an extent unknown elsewhere. The first is the spearhead of science, a phenomenon of basic significance. Not only does it complete the process of disenhancement, but it makes possible the progressive implementation of rational technology in production. Moreover, scientific work is changed to the course of progress. Every scientific fulfillment raises questions. It may ask to be surpassed and outdated. Thus, the institutionalism of social words modern life into an implicit dynamic of innovation and change, which cannot in itself confer meaning. The application of scientific motivations and technology is combined in the modern economy with the introduction of methods rationalizing calculation, exemplified in modern keeping. In bookkeeping, which promoted the methodological conduct of the entrepreneurial activity, which is so distinctive of contemporary capitalism. The conduct of rationalist capitalism is turned entail unavoidable consequences in the spheres of social organization, and inevitable fosters the spread of bureaucracy. Weber treats bureaucratic specialization of task as the most integral failure of capitalism. Thus, Weber express denies that the expressly denies that the expropriations of worker from his own means of production has been confined to the immediate sphere of industry. In Weber's thesis, any form of organization which has a hierarchy of authority can become subject to a process of expropriations. For the Marx notion of the means of production, Weber constitutes the meaning of administration. Weber gives to the organizations of relationship of domination and subordination the prominence which Marx attribute to relationships of production. Any political association, according to Weber, may be organized in a state form, in which the officials themselves own their means of administration. The development are the most important factors promoting the emergence of the modern state, in which the expert officialdom based on the division of labor is wholly separated from the ownership of its own main administration. The spread of bureaucratic specialization is mainly promoted by its technological superiority over the other types of organization in the ordinating administrative tasks. This in turn is particularly dependent upon the filling of bureaucratic position according to the possession of specialized educational qualification. Only the modern development of full bureaucratization brings the system of rational specialized examinations irresistibly to the fore. Reflections and Action 14.3 explain Weber's concept of disenhancement, disenchantment. How does this affect economic progress? The expansion of bureaucratization hence necessarily lead to the demand for specialized education and increasingly fragments the humanistic culture which in previous times made possible the universal man, the thorough and complete human being whom Durkheim speak of. Weber expressed an essentially similar point in holding that the cultivated man of earlier ages is now displaced by the trained specialist. Since the trend towards bureaucratization is irreversible in capitalism, it follows that the growth of functional specialization is a necessary concomitant of the modern social order. See, bureaucracy and democracy. The growth of bureaucratic state proceeds in close connections with the advance of political democratization. Thus, because the demand made by Democrats for the political representation and for the equality before the law necessitate complex administrative and juridical provisions to prevent the exercise of privilege. The fact that the democracy and bureaucratization are so closely related created one of the most profound sources of tension in the modern capitalistic order. For a while, the extension of democratic rights in the contemporary state cannot be achieved without the formulation of any bureaucratic regulation. There is a basic opposition between democracy and bureaucracy. Box number 14.3 Aspects of Rationality. This is for Weber one of the most poignant examples of the contradiction which can exist between the formal and substantive rationality of social action. The growth of the abstract legal procedures which helps to eliminate privilege themselves reintroduce a new form of entrenchment monopoly which is in some respects arbitrary and autonomous than the previously extant. Bureaucratic organization is promoted by the democratic requisite of impersonal selection of position from strata of the population according to the possession of educational institution qualification. But this is in itself creates strata of officials who, because of the separation of their position from the external influence of privileged individuals or groups, possess a more inclusive range of administrative powers than before. The existence of large-scale parties is inevitable in the modern state, but if these parties are headed by political leaders who have strong conviction of the significance of their vocation, bureaucratization of the political structure can be partially checked. The bureaucracy and socialism. If the modern economy were bureaucrat on a socialistic basis and sought to attain a level of technical efficiency in production and distribution of goods comparable to that of capitalism, this would necessitate a tremendous increase in the importance of professional bureaucrats. The bureaucratic division of labor, which is an integral characteristic of modern economy, demands the precise coordination of functions. This is a fact which has been at the root of increase of bureaucratization associated with the expansions of capitalism. But the formation of a socialist state would entitle a considerably higher degree of bureaucratization, since it would place a wider range of administrative tasks in the hands of the state. Weber's primary objections to socialism concern the bureaucratic ramification which it would entail. Those others offers another example of charismatic dilemma of modern times. Those who seek to set up a socialist society, they act under the vision of the attachment of an order in which political participation and self-realization will go beyond the circumscribed form of party democracy found in capitalism. But the result of the impetus to bureaucracy's vision can only be in the direction of promoting the bureaucratization of industry and the state, which will in fact further reduce the political autonomy of the mass population. Modern features of bureaucracy. It is a singular features of bureaucracy that once it has become established, it is, in Weber's word, escape-proof. Modern bureaucracy, characteristic by a much higher level of rational specialization than a patrimonial organizations, is even more resistant to any attempt to raise society from its grip. Such an apparatus makes evolution in the sense of forceful creation of entirely new formations of authority more and more impossible. The spread of bureaucracy in modern capitalism is both cause and consequences of the rationalization of law, politics, and industry. Bureaucratization is the concrete administrative manifestation of the rationalization of action which has penetrated into all spheres of Western culture, including art, music, and architecture. Consequently, for Weber, the analysis of the power of the bureaucratic state provides a paradigm for the explanation of the suggestion of bureaucratization in all spheres. For Marx, on the other hand, the systematic and hierarchical division of labor in the administration of the state represents a concentration of political power. 14.5 Conclusion. For Marx, a primary factor underlying the early origins of capitalism in Western Europe is the historical process of the exploitation of producers from control of their means of production. Capitalism is thus, in its very essence, a class society. The basic contradictions inherent in the capitalistic economy derive directly from its characteristic as a system based upon production for exchange value. The need to maintain or to expand the rate of profit, it is in opposition to the transcendental law of declining profits. The separation of the producer and the consumer in the main factor lying behind the crisis to which the capitalism is currently subject, and the operation of the capitalistic market entitles both that labor power and cannot be sold above its exchange value, and the three comes into being a large reserve army distinctive to live in pauperism. For Durkheim and Weber, the class structure is not integral to the progressive differentiation in the division of labor. Both repudiates the notion that these class divisions express its underlying nature. In Durkheim's conception, the forced division of labor is an abnormal form, but it is not a necessary consequence of the extension of social differentiation in itself. It is primarily the use of economical power to enforce unjust contracts which explains the occurrence of class conflicts. What distinguishes the modern form of society from the traditional types is not its specific class character, but the prevalence of organic solidarity. In Weber's conception, a rational calculation is the primary element in modern capitalistic enterprise, and the rationalization of social life generally is the more distinctive attribute of modern Western culture. The class relations which Marx takes to be the pivot of capitalism is in fact only one element in such more progressive rationalization which extends the process of the expropriations of the worker from his means of production into most of the institutions in contemporary society. The existence of contradictions to be resolved. The existence of the contradictions within capitalism generate no historically necessary for such contradictions to be resolved. On the contrary, the advice of rationalism, which certainly creates a hitherto unknown material abundance, inevitably stimulates a further separation between the distinctive value of Western civilization, freedom, creativity, and spontaneity, and the realities of the iron cage in which modern man is confined. Further reading 14.c. Further reading the book of Max Weber, Essays in Sociology, and the second book is that Capitalism and Modern Social Theory, and third book is that Currents in Sociological Thought. This is the end of Unit 14. Thank you very much.